Welcome back, everyone. Today's deep dive takes us into the surprisingly complex world of the Common Salvinia, all thanks to a blog post that was sent in called Notes on Fishkeeping, Part 89, a closer look of the subtle greens of Common Salvinia.
Yeah, it's from keonmeng.org, published on February 27th, 2025. The author's name is Eng, and he seems to have a lot of different hobbies, gardening to programming. But today we're focusing on his observations about the color variation in his common salvinia.
Right. Aang noticed that the younger Salvinia leaves are bright green, while the older ones are more brownish. Makes you wonder, what causes this? Is it the water, the light, maybe something else?
Well, Eng actually rules out the light and water conditions as the cause because he's maintaining a consistent environment across all of his, and I'm quoting this here, ponds. What's fascinating here is that this color variation is likely due to senescence.
Senescence. What is that? Some kind of plant disease?
Not a disease, no. Senescence is simply the natural aging process of plants, kind of like how our hair turns gray as we get older.
Oh,
In plants, as leaves age, they produce less chlorophyll, the pigment that gives them their green color, and other pigments become more visible, leading to those brownish hues. So it's not just a fading away, it's a transformation. It's a natural part of the plant's life cycle.
so next time I see a plant changing color, I'll know it's not, just dying or something. It's actually going through its own version of aging, just like us. That's pretty cool. But Eng's blog also mentioned something else that caught my eye. Explosive growth. What's going on there? Are these Salvinia on steroids?
Not steroids, but they do have a really efficient way of multiplying. Common salvinia reproduce primarily through fragmentation. Imagine this. A tiny leaf breaks off, and suddenly it's a new plant, like a miniature forest springing up overnight.
Whoa.
This process, coupled with a nutrient-rich environment, leads to what Eng describes as explosive growth.
Wow. Talk about a plant that knows how to make the most of its resources. But speaking of resources, I noticed that Aang keeps putting ponds in quotes. Do you think he's actually growing these Salvinia in something other than a traditional pond?
Hmm, that's an interesting observation. Looking at the wider context of his blog, we see that Aang is quite the Renaissance man. He's got posts on everything from gardening to programming to even breeding betta fish. So these ponds could be anything from containers to tanks, or maybe even something more unconventional. Who knows what this creative mind has come up with?
It does make you wonder. Now, I know we're getting deep into the weeds here, but why should you, the listener, care about the color variations and growth patterns of this tiny floating plant?
It's a great question, and it's all about the bigger picture. Understanding seemingly small details, like the color of a leaf or how a plant spreads, can give us insights into much larger concepts. For instance, have you ever thought about how invasive species take over entire ecosystems?
I know invasive species can be a huge problem, but what does that have to do with our little Salvinia?
Well, some types of salvinia can actually become invasive. Their rapid growth and efficient reproduction, the very things we've been discussing, allow them to outcompete native plants and disrupt the balance of an ecosystem. It's like a tiny army taking over a vast territory.
So this tiny plant could actually pack a pretty big punch if it gets out of control.
Exactly. And on the flip side, that rapid growth could also be harnessed for good. Scientists are exploring the potential of plants like salvinia for bioremediation.
Bioremediation. That sounds pretty high-tech for, something involving a plant.
It might sound futuristic, but the concept is actually quite simple. Bioremediation uses living organisms, like plants, to remove or neutralize pollutants from the environment.
Okay.
In the case of salvinia, their rapid growth means they can absorb large amounts of pollutants from the water, effectively cleaning it up. Imagine harnessing that explosive growth to help restore polluted lakes and rivers.
Whoa, so these tiny plants could be like little environmental superheroes.
Yeah.
I never realized how much potential they have. But hold on, didn't you say that some types of salvinia can be invasive? Isn't that a contradiction?
That's a great point, and it highlights the complexity of this issue. It's a delicate balance. On one hand, salvinia's rapid growth makes it a potential tool for bioremediation, but on the other, if not carefully managed, that same growth can lead to them taking over and causing harm to native ecosystems. You see, it all comes down to understanding the plant's biology, its environment, and the potential consequences of its growth.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where we can use the salvinia's powers for good without letting things get out of control. It sounds like a challenge.
It is a challenge, but it's one that scientists and researchers are actively working on. They're studying different species of salvinia, their growth patterns, and their impact on different environments to determine how we can best utilize their potential while mitigating the risks.
That's reassuring to know. It seems like the more we learn about this little plant, the more fascinating it becomes. But I can't help but wonder, what about Aang and his ponds? He ends his blog post wondering how quickly the Salvinia will take over. What do you think will happen?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Based on what we've discussed about the Salvinia's rapid growth and Eng's description of it as explosive, I think it's safe to say that those ponds, whatever they may be, are in for a significant transformation.
So a Salvinia takeover is imminent. Do you think Aang has a plan for managing this potential green explosion, I mean?
It's hard to say for sure without knowing the specifics of his setup and intentions, but this raises an important point: responsible stewardship. Even something as seemingly harmless as a floating plant can have unintended consequences if its growth goes unchecked.
Right.
Whether it's a garden pond, a local waterway, or even a global ecosystem, we need to be mindful of the delicate balance of nature.
So what's the takeaway here for our listeners? What should we do if we find ourselves, face to face with a rapidly spreading plant, even a beautiful one like the Salvinia?
The key is informed decision-making. It's about appreciating the beauty and wonder of nature while also understanding the potential impacts of our actions. If you're dealing with a plant like Salvinia, research its growth habits, consider the environment, and explore different management strategies.
So we need to be proactive and responsible, just like those scientists studying the Salvinia for bioremediation. It's all about finding that balance between harnessing nature's power and respecting its limits. But let's be honest, wouldn't it be kind of awesome to witness a Salvinia takeover firsthand? Just imagine, a sea of green, those tiny leaves blanketing the surface of the water.
It would certainly be a sight to behold. But even as we marvel at the beauty of nature, we need to remember that with great power comes great responsibility. Aang's final thought in his blog post really brings this home. He wonders, what would I do in this situation? It's a question that challenges us to think critically and creatively about how we interact with the natural world.
He's passing the torch to us, the listeners. We've got the knowledge, now it's time to apply it. So if you were in Aang's shoes, what would you do? Would you try to contain the Salvinia, embrace the green takeover, or find a more balanced approach?
There's no one-size-fits-all answer. The best approach depends on the context, your goals, and the values you prioritize. The important thing is to be aware of the potential consequences of our actions and to make informed decisions that respect the delicate balance of nature.
That's a great point. Sometimes the most, seemingly insignificant things can have a ripple effect, like that butterfly effect we always hear about, but with plants. So what started as a simple observation about the color of Salvinia leaves has turned into a deep dive into the complexities of plant biology, invasive species, bioremediation, and responsible stewardship. It really makes you appreciate the interconnectedness of everything. Who knew that a tiny floating plant could hold so many lessons about science, ecology, and even ethics?
It's a reminder that the world is full of fascinating details just waiting to be explored. Sometimes the most profound insights come from the most unexpected places.
Exactly. And on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought. What tiny detail in your world has the potential to unlock a bigger understanding? What will you deep dive into next? Thanks for joining us.